What if the thing you trusted most to protect you from evil was the very thing bringing it closer? That unsettling idea sits at the center of Oddity, a supernatural horror film that builds its fear not through constant jump scares, but through atmosphere, mystery, and the slow realization that reality is not as stable as it seems. This is a story where objects carry memory, silence hides intention, and the past refuses to stay buried. From the beginning, the film creates a sense of unease that never fully disappears. Nothing feels entirely normal, even in quiet moments. Rooms feel too still. Shadows feel too intentional. And every interaction seems to carry meaning beyond what is spoken. At its core, Oddity is not just about supernatural events. It is about perception. The film constantly challenges what the characters believe they are seeing versus what might actually be happening. This tension becomes the foundation of the entire narrative. One of the strongest themes in the movie is grief. Loss does not remain in the past. Instead, it lingers and reshapes the present. Characters are not simply reacting to external threats. They are also reacting to emotional wounds that have never healed properly. This emotional instability becomes the perfect entry point for something unknown to interfere. The film introduces the idea that certain objects can become vessels for memory and emotion. These objects are not alive in a traditional sense, but they seem to carry traces of human experience. Whether this is supernatural or psychological is left deliberately unclear, and that ambiguity is what makes the story so disturbing. Because once you begin to question whether objects can remember, you also begin to question whether you are truly alone. Another key aspect of Oddity is how it uses silence as a storytelling tool. The absence of sound is not empty. It is loaded with tension. Quiet moments often feel more dangerous than loud ones, because they force the audience to pay attention to details that would normally be ignored. The film also plays heavily with the idea of unseen presence. Characters often feel watched even when nothing is visibly there. This creates a psychological pressure that gradually influences their behavior. They begin reacting not only to what they know, but also to what they fear might exist just outside their perception. One hidden detail many viewers may overlook is how the film uses repetition in visual framing. Certain angles, positions, and object placements reappear throughout the story with subtle variations. This creates a sense that the environment itself is remembering events, even when the characters are trying to move forward. This technique reinforces the idea that nothing in the film is truly forgotten. Another important theme is control versus helplessness. Characters repeatedly attempt to assert control over their surroundings, but those efforts are constantly undermined by forces they cannot fully understand. Whether those forces are supernatural or psychological remains intentionally ambiguous. That ambiguity is what drives the horror. Because uncertainty is often more frightening than explanation. As the narrative progresses, the tension shifts from external mystery to internal instability. Characters begin questioning their own interpretations of events. Memory becomes unreliable. Perception becomes fragile. And trust becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. This gradual breakdown of certainty is one of the film's most effective storytelling techniques. The audience is placed in the same position as the characters, forced to interpret incomplete information while dealing with rising emotional pressure. Another fascinating element of the movie is its treatment of grief as something active rather than passive. Grief in Oddity does not simply exist in the background. It influences decisions, distorts judgment, and shapes how characters interpret reality. In many ways, grief becomes a second antagonist. Not because it is evil, but because it is powerful. As the film moves toward its climax, the boundaries between the physical and the psychological become increasingly blurred. Events that once seemed clearly supernatural begin to take on emotional and symbolic meanings. At the same time, psychological explanations begin to feel insufficient. This dual interpretation keeps the audience constantly unsettled. The ending of Oddity does not provide simple closure. Instead, it reinforces the film's central theme: some experiences cannot be neatly categorized. Some questions do not have definitive answers. And some forms of loss cannot be fully understood, only endured. The final moments leave viewers with a lingering sense of uncertainty. Not because nothing is explained, but because the explanations themselves may not be enough. The film suggests that truth is not always about clarity. Sometimes truth is about what remains when clarity disappears. And in that space between understanding and uncertainty, fear becomes most powerful. Oddity succeeds because it transforms a simple supernatural premise into a deeply psychological experience. It is not just about what is happening in the story, but about how the story affects perception itself. By the end, the audience is left with a single unsettling thought. Maybe the most dangerous thing is not what we see in the dark, but what we believe we see. If you enjoyed this analysis and ending explained, don't forget to subscribe to Movie Story Recaps, share this video with fellow horror fans, and let us know in the comments which movie we should cover next.